Hi there. This is another look-see for July. I put out the main look-see earlier this month, right around July 4th, but because of the number of things happening, I thought I'd add a few comments and do a second look-see. So let's begin. And also, this look-see will be a little bit different. You've all heard me say that I am going to say what I see. When I'm looking at the world and I see a lot happening in the world of politics and government, then that's what I'm going to report on. What I see doesn't always match what I want or what I think should be done. However, I'm going to say what I see. Sometimes I will share what I think personally, and when I do, I usually say so quite plainly. But as a rule, I try to leave personal views aside. So having said that, it's impossible to take myself out completely because I'm the one doing the looking. So let me say right up front here that I personally want a world that works together, one that's peaceful, beautiful, and productive in terms of people who are energetic, but calm, focused, but focused in a broad way, intuitive. I want people that are critical thinkers, inventive, self-sufficient, and working toward wonderful relationships with one another as well as with others across the solar system and the galaxy. I'm not interested in nations that fight to be king of the mountain. I don't like countries that just want to control others or that enact stupid policies that interfere with the development of human potential. U.S. hegemony is the lowest level of national goal we could possibly set as a people. And those who are willing to run roughshod over others instead of learning how to advance the entire reality system, those are not the people I want in positions of leadership. In addition, I tend to be quite apolitical. You know, I'm not a political animal in the sense that some of the people in Washington are. I do not get caught up in whatever or whoever the crowd is chasing or idolizing. I have been like this my whole life. I remember my classmates and friends going apeshit over the Beatles, and I could not understand what was wrong, that they completely lost their minds over four guys playing guitars and drums. It took me a long time to appreciate the Beatle music. In the same way, I do not care who is president. I care about his or her decisions, policies, and actions. And I prefer decisions and policies and actions that are fair, that are right, wise, benevolent, courageous, honest, necessary, and good for us over the long haul. When I'm looking at the world to see what's happening, I see a lot of poor decision-making that is short-sighted, unfair, lacks wisdom, and will lead to greater problems down the road. So I'm going to say something regardless of who made the decision. I don't idolize or excuse anyone just because they happen to be popular. That is identity politics. So I've taken a lot of heat for things I said in earlier look-sees, especially in May, June, and July of this year. People wrote to complain if I said something good about Trump. Others wrote to take issue with anything that criticized Trump. But I stand by what I said. It is a reflection of where the population is at that moment in time. A good example of the challenge in this kind of work was in the May look-see. I wrote that, quote, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Alex Jones were the most important voices of our time, end quote. I said it because when I was surveying and looking at what's happening in the world and how people were feeling, those were the voices that people felt were most important. Those were the voices they were listening to and trusting the most. It wasn't my personal opinion. I listened to a much wider variety of voices from all sides, and I let those messages kind of gel naturally. And what often comes out of that is some surprising, intuitive insights. The bottom line is that when I criticize or give credit to a Trump, a Biden, Putin, or anyone, it's not because I am on their side. It's because I see their results. And after 77 years of living and learning, watching, and seeing what the results are, I can see where those results are leading. And I want good results. We all want good results. And I will credit whoever is moving in the direction of good results. So having said that, if there's a single word that characterizes the majority of things I have read, watched, or listened to in the past month, that word is confusion. Trump the savior is behaving unpredictably, reversing things he said earlier. The Democrats are doing the same, contradicting what they have been saying and standing for in the past. The polls that showed a very favored Trump are dropping into the toilet. The financial policies being signed into law will lead to a whole new kind of money and financial system with tight controls and a trail of broken dreams for many. The trade policies being enacted and tariffs will lead to shunning and isolation of the U.S. from the rest of the world. Indeed, some countries are now calling for embargoes against the U.S. The people we chose to lead us have squandered trust, the trust in the U.S., and we are about to be dropped by a good many of our former trade partners. Anyone watching can see that the government and the financial system are not the only corruption in town. The legal system has been corrupted all the way to the top. And the same can be said for all those other systems: food and agriculture, water, medicine and pharmaceuticals, science, technology, the military, the education system, everything. In several recent conversations, I've heard different people make the same comment. Quote, "It's all rotten. The whole thing is bad," end quote. And it is. So where does this leave us? It leaves us facing the fact that our entire system is going to come down. It will have rotted from within, mostly. So let me point out a few things for consideration. First, the Trump phenomenon is not a cult. I often hear people say that it's a cult. No, it's not. From my point of view, people are desperately looking for someone to save their country and their way of life. This desperation is to be expected given the recent attacks on the population, stuff that was demanded, we put in the arm, the children, our jobs, income, lifestyle, everything. We are not in a politics as usual situation. Something very difficult is unfolding. For people who have spent their lives working every day from 9 to 5 or 3 to 11, people who put money into retirement plans because they hope to eventually slow down and do some things they always wanted to do. For those people, the uncertainty and chaos is very upsetting. They were behind Trump because they hoped he would be able to stabilize our situation and make their life of work make sense, while also making their retirement plans worthwhile. Again, the Trump phenomenon is not a cult. It is a population that was raised on votes and trust. Votes and trust. Trust that the guy who won would do his best to make the world a better place. But that's not how things are working out. So let's look at just 3 glaring factors: draining the swamp, Israel, and globalism. When a government gets as big, as convoluted, as detached and deaf as the US government has become, it becomes like a giant hairball that cannot be untangled. It must be cut out. When Donald Trump said he would drain the swamp, it looks like what he was really saying was that he was going to cut out the hairball. The implications of this are enormous because the swamp included all of the nations of the West, the entire globalist system of trade and finance, and Israel. This means that everything we have known, built our lives and businesses around, and planned for is no longer working or likely to occur. We're not just going to have a few arrests and everything will go back to normal. In draining the swamp, many have heard the message that said, quote, Israel would be saved to last. There was no description of what would happen regarding Israel, but when I first heard that statement, I thought it might mean Netanyahu would be removed from power. I, and probably a lot of others, immediately assumed that Israel was not only corrupt, but must have been a key to unlocking corruption worldwide. It was pretty clear that Trump did not like Netanyahu. Did Trump appear to support Israel because that was part of the setup that gave Israel the balls to attack Iran, thus giving Iran a reason to crush the Israeli state? Was Trump's support of Israel just an act that was part of the movie we have all been watching? From where I stand now, it looks like Israel was set up to be taken out by its own greedy push for power and control. Israel has blocked photos and reports that show the severe damage done to Tel Aviv, their military headquarters, their science and military teams, and a great deal of their infrastructure. But the truth is, they have been crushed. Who has really been crushed in this operation? It's the Rothschilds, their backers, and their plan to control our world from the most strategic location in the world, the Middle East. Is that why Israel was planning to take out 7 countries in 7 years, and we were going to do it for them? Were they planning to run the world from a central location between Europe, Asia, and Africa? When surveying the globalist system as the main infrastructure of corruption, What becomes obvious is that the ordinary man, woman, or small group is almost entirely ineffective in trying to combat this system. When the whole thing is corrupt, even legal recourse will not help restore justice and balance. There's no point in standing up because the individual who does so will just end up being taken out one way or another. The powerlessness of the population is made worse by poor food, chronic physical and mental conditions, education that pushed the corrupt narrative, and the absence of critical thinking, good reading and verbal skills, and a useful understanding of what is happening in terms of the big picture. When you add in generations of believing that their vote counted and trust in the government was normal, you have the perfect recipe for catastrophe. So what is the catastrophe? It's the cutting out of the hairball mentioned above, because entangled in that hairball is the money, food, medicine, science, technology, business, and all the rules of civil society that make a world work well. If Donald Trump is here to drain the swamp, he would have to collapse the entire old order. Is he making explicit moves that will accomplish the strategic goals of taking down the deep state without directly confronting those players, because doing so would alert them to what he is doing? I would be willing to bet that 99% of the Trumpers out there have assumed that he was going to arrest a few people and fix the old system. He can't. It's too big, too corrupt, and too tangled to unravel. It has to be taken down piece by piece. And that is why everyone is dealing with confusion, feeling anxious, and knowing that something big is coming. What are the big pieces that would have to come down? I would say that perhaps the biggest piece is, or was, the network of collaborators around the perimeter who took orders from those in the core and at the top. Those people on the perimeter were doing much of the dirty work. I suspect that removal of this piece has been going on for a number of years. The banking system would be another big piece because that is the stronghold of the corruption. The solution here might be the setup of an entirely new digital system that has tight controls built into it in order to detect corruption much sooner than in the past. Is that why Trump signed the Genius Act into law on July 18th? Another big piece might be the traitorous half of the military. Might Trump be ramping up the war in Ukraine so he can send those traitors to fight there where they would be wiped out by the Russians? They might die fighting for the corruption they espoused. Or let's be more adventurous in our thinking and say, oh, they might be sent to the moon to fight some of the highly advanced but corrupt people based there. I know that's a little far-fetched, but not too long ago, the idea that such chaos as we're seeing here could happen in the US was just as far-fetched. Other big pieces to occur might be martial law to quell a population that has been cut off from pensions and bank accounts. Martial law might have to be imposed to handle illegal immigrants who have suddenly been cut off or abandoned. It might be used to quiet anyone rampaging around because they're hungry due to the shutoff of trade with other nations, and now not enough food coming in. Maybe martial law would be used to keep people from wandering around or trying to get to another part of the country because the house they were living in became unlivable for some reason. Maybe a shortage of natural gas, propane, or some other fuel for heating and cooling. While these are all pieces of a takedown strategy that could unfold in the US, there are also things that could unfold internationally. We might see a limited nuclear strike on some place where we have been unable to root out the corruption. We might see parts of the global communication system going down in order to cut off the deep state's ability to organize and communicate. Your area could go dark if it's part of that set of communication linkages. So the thing to know here is that when it comes to government, banking, food, medicine, and our future, we do not really know anything for sure, except what we are experiencing at the moment. Thus, if you are experiencing anxiety or a feeling that something big is coming, that is what you should be paying attention to. Your body is signaling that it senses a big change. And that kind of intuitive knowing, while not easy to explain, is something one should not ignore. I'll close with 4 possible scenarios that might fit what is happening now. First, it may be that Trump is betraying us and had no intention of making America great again. Second, it may be that he has made some serious mistakes in judgment and is now trying to correct them. Third, he might be a puppet controlled by Netanyahu and the Zionist cabal, and he's doing his best to satisfy 2 masters. And fourth, he may be deliberately destroying the economy and the relationships that the U.S. had in an effort to break the back of the globalists and their grip on us. He may be trying to force the United States to become self-sufficient once more because that capacity was deliberately destroyed by the globalist system. He may be deliberately acting in a contradictory and confusing manner on purpose to force us to withdraw all trust and support from the system that has been so corrupt for the last 50 years. The last 6 of which we have begun to feel the sting of that corruption and finally to wake up. What Trump is doing will make things difficult for every country in the world, simply because globalism was global and it involved every country in the world. The US military was used as the global enforcer. And to break that system, not only will everyone feel some pain, the U.S. will have to be humbled. Many social media heads are complaining about what Trump is doing, warning about the polls dropping, and trying to analyze his decisions, while the Democrats are energetically pushing their narrative, causing more confusion and uncertainty about what to think. If uncertainty is the arch enemy of business, and Trump is a major businessman with years of experience, why would he be bouncing around, slapping tariffs here and there, raising them, lowering them, making them temporary, threatening every country when he knows what effects this will have? What does this tell us about what he is trying to do? Quite clearly, he is deliberately creating confusion and uncertainty. Why would he want to create confusion and uncertainty? Is it because he's trying to unseat and destroy the big multinationals, their trade deals, and their profits? Because these are the heart of the deep state cabal. Perhaps when we hear the statement, the strength of the U.S. economy is in the strength of the U.S. dollar, what we should really be hearing is the strength of the deep state is in the strength of the U.S. dollar and the banking system they control. Is Trump working to eliminate the banking system? Is he working to create confusion and uncertainty because it is part of the plan to undo the strength of the deep state? Americans have worked their asses off for years, paid their taxes, and never realized they were supporting a whole world of corruption. It looks to me like Trump, Musk, and the team in DC are still focused on draining the swamp or cutting out the hairball. The thing for us to do is understand what may be happening behind those curtains and be ready to stand on our own. Thank you for listening, and I hope this gives you something to think about.